Mira Everson could feel the blisters forming on her heels as she stood near the marble pillar, champagne flute untouched in her hand, counting down the minutes until she could reasonably escape this gilded prison without offending her boss. The annual Crawford Foundation Gala was supposed to be an honor to attend, a perk of her position as Senior Acquisitions Director at Hartley Museum. But after 3 hours of forced smiles and shallow conversations about vacation homes and yacht clubs, she was done. Her best friend Sarah had bailed last minute with the flu, leaving Mira to navigate this sea of designer gowns and trust funds alone. She glanced at her phone. 9:30. She could slip out now, claim an early morning meeting, and be home in her pajamas watching trashy television within the hour. She set her champagne on a passing tray and made her way toward the grand foyer, weaving between clusters of guests who seemed to genuinely enjoy these events. The ballroom of the Crawford estate was undeniably stunning, all soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers, but Mira had never felt comfortable in spaces like this. She preferred the quiet halls of the museum, surrounded by art and history rather than wealth and status. Her emerald dress, borrowed from her sister, suddenly felt too tight, too much. She just wanted to breathe. "Leaving already?" The voice came from directly behind her, deep and smooth with an edge of amusement that made her spine straighten. Mira turned and found herself looking up at Ethan Crawford himself. She recognized him immediately, though they had never been formally introduced. Tall, probably 6'3", with dark hair that looked like he had run his hands through it more than once tonight, sharp jaw, and eyes so intensely blue they seemed to cut through the dim lighting. He wore his tuxedo like it was a second skin, comfortable in a way that spoke of a lifetime attending events like this. At 32, he was young for a billionaire, having transformed his family's modest real estate holdings into an empire that spanned commercial development, luxury hotels, and philanthropic ventures. Forbes had called him the most eligible bachelor in the city 3 years running. Mira had called him intimidating from a distance and was finding that assessment even more accurate up close. "I have an early morning," she said, which was not technically a lie. She did have a morning, and it would come early. "The gala doesn't end for another 2 hours. We have not even started the live auction yet." He stepped closer, not crowding her but definitely blocking her path to the door. "And you are Mira Everson from Hartley Museum. We were supposed to meet tonight." "We were." Mira shifted her clutch from one hand to the other, trying to remember if her boss had mentioned anything about meeting the host. "I have been considering a significant donation to the museum. Art Acquisition Fund, specifically. Your director mentioned you would be here and that you were the person I should speak with." His eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her heart rate pick up. "But you have been hiding by that pillar for the last hour." "I was not hiding. I was observing. You were planning your escape route. I watched you check your phone 4 times in 10 minutes. The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile but close. "Stay. Talk to me about what the museum needs. If you can convince me your acquisitions are worth my money, I will make it worth your while to have stayed." Mira felt torn between professional obligation and personal exhaustion. The museum desperately needed funding. They had lost out on 3 major pieces in the last year alone because they could not compete with private collectors. The Renaissance wing was basically empty. If Ethan Crawford was seriously considering a donation, she could not walk away. Even if her feet were killing her and she would rather be anywhere else. "How much are we talking?" she asked, deciding to be direct. "That depends on how good your pitch is. Buy you a drink and you can tell me why I should care about old paintings." He gestured toward the bar set up in the corner, away from the main crowd. Against her better judgment, Mira nodded. "All right. But I should warn you, I am very good at my job. I am counting on it." They moved through the ballroom together, and Mira was acutely aware of the looks they attracted. Women watched Ethan with obvious interest, men with calculation. She was used to being invisible at these events, the museum representative who was invited out of courtesy but not really part of this world. Walking beside Ethan Crawford changed that equation entirely. Suddenly she was visible, and she was not sure she liked it. The bar was quieter, tucked into an alcove with leather chairs and warm lighting. Ethan ordered a whiskey neat and raised an eyebrow at Mira. "White wine," she said. "Sauvignon Blanc if they have it." Once they had their drinks, Ethan led her to two chairs positioned away from the other guests. He sat with the easy confidence of someone who owned everything around him, which technically he did. Mira perched on the edge of her seat, trying to find a position where her shoes did not hurt. "Take them off," Ethan said, nodding toward her heels. "Excuse me, your shoes. You have been wincing every time you take a step. Take them off. I am not going to judge you for it." Mira hesitated, then decided comfort trumped propriety. She slipped off the silver heels and felt immediate relief. "Thank you. Borrowed dress, borrowed shoes. My own wardrobe is more suited to museum archives than Gala's. And yet you clean up remarkably well." The compliment was delivered casually, but Mira felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You wanted to hear about the museum," she redirected, taking a sip of wine for courage. "What do you already know about our collection?" "I know you have an impressive European collection, strong American contemporary wing, and a growing Asian art section. I also know your acquisitions budget has been cut by 30% in the last 2 years and you are struggling to stay competitive. You have done your homework. I always do." He leaned back in his chair, studying her over the rim of his glass. "What I want to know is why I should care. There are a dozen museums in this city. What makes Hartley worth my investment?" Mira set down her wine and leaned forward, her exhaustion forgotten as she shifted into the passion that had drawn her to this career in the first place. "Because Hartley is not about impressing wealthy donors or creating Instagram opportunities. We are about preservation and education. Our programs reach 20,000 students a year, most of them from underfunded schools that do not have art programs. We bring history and beauty and culture to people who might never otherwise experience it. Yes, we have an impressive collection, but what we are really building is connection. Between past and present, between different cultures, between art and the people who need it most." "That sounds like a rehearsed speech." "It is the truth." Mira met his eyes steadily. "I grew up in a small town in Ohio. We did not have much money. When I was 12, my teacher took our class to an art museum in Cleveland. I stood in front of a Monet painting for 20 minutes and felt something shift inside me. It was like seeing in color for the first time. That experience changed the trajectory of my entire life. I want to give other kids that same chance." Something shifted in Ethan's expression, the polite interest replaced by genuine curiosity. "What painting?" "Water lilies." The light on the water looked alive. I could not understand how someone could capture something so ephemeral and make it permanent. She smiled at the memory. "I probably sounded insane trying to explain it to my parents later." "I don't think that sounds insane at all." Ethan set his glass down and leaned forward, mirroring her posture. "I had a similar experience, actually. When I was 14, my father took me to see the architecture of Frank Lloyd Wright, Fallingwater specifically. I stood there looking at how the house integrated with the waterfall and the forest around it, and I understood for the first time that buildings could be art. That spaces could make people feel things. It is why I went into development instead of just managing the family portfolio. I did not know that, Mira admitted. I thought you were just a real estate mogul. Just a real estate mogul, he repeated with amusement. That is definitely going on my tombstone. Mira laughed despite herself. I did not mean it like that. Yes, you did, but that is all right. Most people see the bottom line and not what drives it. He finished his whiskey. Tell me what pieces you would acquire if money were not an object. For the next hour, Mira forgot she was at a gala she had wanted to escape. She told Ethan about the Baroque collection that was going to auction next month, pieces that would complete their European wing and provide incredible educational opportunities. She described the contemporary indigenous artists whose work deserved museum recognition, but were consistently overlooked by larger institutions. She pulled up images on her phone of sculptures and paintings and installations that had captured her imagination. Ethan listened with complete attention, asking questions that revealed he knew far more about art than she had expected. He challenged her choices, made her defend her reasoning, and seemed genuinely engaged in the conversation. When she finally paused to take a breath, she realized the ballroom had gotten quieter, the crowd thinning as guests began to leave. "What time is it?" she asked, reaching for her phone. "Almost 11:30. We have been talking for 2 hours." Apparently, when you get passionate about something, you forget to watch the clock. Ethan stood and offered his hand to help her up. "Come with me. There is something I want to show you." Mira hesitated, very aware that her shoes were still on the floor and she was barefoot in an evening gown. "Show me what? Trust me." His hand remained extended, patient but expectant. She took it, feeling the warmth and strength of his grip as he pulled her to her feet. He handed her the heels. "Bring these, but you don't have to wear them." He led her out of the ballroom through a side door, down a corridor lit with antique sconces, and up a curved staircase. Mira knew she should probably ask where they were going, should probably be more cautious about following a man she barely knew through his mansion, but her curiosity outweighed her hesitation. They stopped in front of a heavy wooden door. Ethan pulled a key from his pocket and unlocked it, then gestured for her to enter. The room took her breath away. It was a private gallery, walls painted a deep navy that made the artwork pop. Track lighting illuminated maybe 20 pieces, carefully curated and beautifully displayed. She recognized some immediately, others were new to her. A small Degas sketch hung beside a bold contemporary abstract. A landscape that looked like it might be Hudson River School faced a stunning photograph of urban architecture. "This is your private collection," Mira said, moving into the room with reverence. "It is what I actually care about, beyond the business and the obligations." Ethan closed the door behind them and watched as she examined each piece. "I do not show this to many people." "Why show me?" "Because you understand. Most of the people downstairs at that gala see art as investment or status. You see it as something alive and necessary." He moved to stand beside her in front of a small oil painting of a woman reading by candlelight. "This one is my favorite. It is not by anyone famous. I found it in an estate sale in Vermont. But look at the way the light falls across her face, the absolute peace in her expression. Whoever painted this understood that reading is a kind of intimacy." Mira looked at the painting and then at Ethan, seeing him differently now. Not just the billionaire host of an event she wanted to escape, but someone who felt the same connection to art that she did. "This collection is extraordinary. Why keep it private?" "Because it is mine," he said simply. "The world gets enough of me. This is something I keep for myself. And for people who will appreciate it." He turned to look at her. "Like you." The air in the room felt charged suddenly, the space between them crackling with something Mira could not quite name. She was intensely aware of how alone they were, how intimate this felt compared to the crowded gala downstairs. "I should probably get back," she said, though she made no move toward the door. "You were trying to leave 2 hours ago. Now you want to go back to the party. Fair point." She smiled, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "I guess I am not sure what the protocol is when a billionaire shows you his private art collection." "There is not a protocol. I am just sharing something that matters to me with someone who I think will understand it." Ethan moved closer, not touching but near enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "And I am trying to prove that staying was worth it. You are making a compelling case. Good, because I have more to show you." He walked to another door she had not noticed, this one leading to a terrace. The night air was cool against Mira's skin as she stepped outside. The terrace overlooked the estate grounds, gardens lit with subtle landscape lighting stretching toward darkness. The city skyline glittered in the distance. It was beautiful in a way that felt almost unreal. "I come out here when I need to think," Ethan said, leaning against the stone balustrade. "When the business gets too loud, when the expectations get too heavy. It reminds me there is more to the world than board meetings and profit margins." Mira joined him at the railing, the stone cool beneath her hands. "Can I ask you something? Anything? Why do you do it? The galas, the foundation, the public face of everything. You clearly value privacy and have your own interests. You could just run your business and avoid all this." Ethan was quiet for a moment, his profile sharp against the night sky. "My father built this company from almost nothing. He came from poverty, worked construction jobs to put himself through college, scraped and saved to buy his first property. By the time he died 5 years ago, he had built something substantial. But he always said that wealth is only meaningful if you use it to create opportunity for others. The foundation, the donations, the public engagement, that is all his legacy. I may find it exhausting sometimes, but I won't let it die with him. That is a beautiful way to honor him." "It is a heavy way to honor him," Ethan corrected, but his tone was not bitter. "But it is worth it. Most of the time." He turned to face her fully. "Tonight, though, it has been more than worth it. Because you might get to donate to a museum. Because I met someone who sees the world the way I do, who understands that money is just a tool, not a purpose." His eyes held hers. "And because you are fascinating and honest, and you were going to walk out of my gala without a second thought until I stopped you." Mira's heart was racing now, her skin tingling with awareness. This was dangerous territory. She did not date wealthy men, had deliberately avoided any entanglement with the donor class that her job brought her into contact with. Too much complication, too much potential for conflict of interest. But standing here with Ethan, seeing the vulnerability beneath the confident exterior, she found her usual rules feeling less important. "I am glad you stopped me," she admitted softly. "Yeah." He reached out and gently tucked another strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers barely brushing her skin but sending electricity through her entire body. "Yeah. Then let me make you even more glad." He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then put it away. "I am donating $5 million to Hartley Museum's acquisition fund. Unrestricted, to be used at your discretion for whatever pieces you think will best serve your mission." Mira felt her knees go weak. $5 million. Ethan, that is incredible. That is more than our entire acquisitions budget for 3 years. "I know. I looked it up." He was smiling now, clearly pleased with her reaction. "Consider it an investment in making sure other 12-year-old kids get to stand in front of paintings and see in color for the first time." She did not think, just acted on impulse and threw her arms around his neck in a hug. He caught her easily, his arms wrapping around her waist and holding her close. She could feel the solid warmth of him, smell his cologne mixed with whiskey and something uniquely him. When she pulled back, she was acutely aware that his arms had not dropped, that her hands were still on his shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered. "You are welcome." His voice was rough, his eyes dark as they searched her face. "Can I take you to dinner tomorrow night? Somewhere that does not require uncomfortable shoes or small talk about vacation homes. That would not be appropriate. You are a donor now. Then I will rescind the donation. You would not dare. Try me." But he was smiling and she was smiling, and the rules that had seemed so important an hour ago felt increasingly irrelevant. "One dinner," she conceded. "Somewhere quiet. I know just the place." They stood there for another moment, neither wanting to move before Ethan finally stepped back. "I should let you go home before your feet revolt completely against those shoes. Probably wise." But she felt disappointed rather than relieved. He walked her back through the gallery, down the stairs, and to the front entrance where a valet was waiting to bring cars around. Most of the guests had left, just a few stragglers saying their goodbyes. Ethan handed the valet Mira's ticket himself. "Tomorrow at 7, he confirmed. 7 works. Give me your number. I will text you the address." She rattled it off and heard his phone ping a moment later with the contact information. Her car appeared, her practical Honda looking distinctly out of place among the luxury vehicles, but Ethan opened the door for her without a flicker of judgment. "Drive safe," he said. "I will. And Ethan, thank you for stopping me from leaving, for the donation, for tonight. Thank you for staying, for seeing past the billionaire thing, for talking to me about art like I am just someone who cares rather than a checkbook." He leaned down, and for a heart-stopping moment she thought he might kiss her, but instead he pressed his lips to her forehead, gentle and warm. "Good night, Mira. Good night." She drove home in a daze, her mind replaying every moment of the evening. The way he had looked at her in the gallery, the roughness in his voice on the terrace, the strength of his arms when she had hugged him. She had gone to that gala planning to escape as soon as possible, and instead she had found something completely unexpected. Someone completely unexpected. Her apartment felt especially small and cluttered after the grandeur of the Crawford estate, but it was hers and she loved it. She hung up the borrowed dress, threw the torture device heels in the back of her closet, and collapsed on her bed in her pajamas. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Already counting down to 7 tomorrow. Sleep well. She saved the contact and responded. "Same, thank you again for everything, M." Another buzz. "Stop thanking me. You earned it with that passionate dissertation on why art matters. I should be thanking you for making my gala bearable. I thought you said it was worth it." It was. "You were." Mira fell asleep smiling, her exhaustion from the evening mixing with anticipation for what might come next. The next day at work was chaos. Her boss nearly fell out of his chair when she told him about the donation. And the rest of the day was consumed with meetings about how to allocate the funds and which pieces to pursue first. Mira loved her job, but the administrative side often overshadowed the actual art. Today, though, she felt energized, driven by the knowledge that they could finally compete for the collections they needed. By 6:30, she was home and frantically trying to figure out what to wear. Ethan had texted that the restaurant was casual, which helped, but she still wanted to look nice. She settled on dark jeans, a silk blouse in deep burgundy, and ankle boots that were infinitely more comfortable than last night's heels. She left her hair down in loose waves and kept her makeup simple. The restaurant turned out to be a small Italian place in a neighborhood she did not know well. From the outside, it looked unassuming. the kind of family-owned establishment that had been there for decades. Inside was warm and dimly lit, with maybe 15 tables, and the smell of garlic and fresh bread making her stomach growl. Ethan was already there, sitting at a corner table and looking unfairly attractive in jeans and a navy sweater that made his eyes even more blue. He stood when he saw her, and she felt that same flutter in her chest as last night. "You found it all right?" he asked, pulling out her chair. "GPS is a wonderful thing." She sat, accepting a menu from the hovering waiter. "This place is charming. Best Italian food in the city, and they do not care that I have money. The owner, Mrs. Castellano, treats everyone like family." "Which means she will probably interrogate you at some point. Fair warning." "Interrogate me about what? Whether my intentions are honorable, if I am treating you well, that sort of thing." He grinned. "She has been trying to set me up with her granddaughter for 3 years. And you have been successfully avoiding it." "I have been successfully avoiding all setups, period. Until now. This is not a setup. This is a thank you dinner for a generous donation. Keep telling yourself that." His eyes sparkled with amusement. They ordered, Ethan recommending the lasagna and Mira choosing the carbonara, and fell into easy conversation. Without the pressure of the gala or the formality of discussing business, they talked about everything else. Childhoods and college experiences, favorite books and movies that made them cry, travel dreams and embarrassing stories. Mira learned that Ethan had a younger sister who was a marine biologist in California, that he had been engaged once in his 20s, but it had fallen apart when he realized they wanted completely different lives, and that he secretly loved terrible action movies despite his sophisticated art collection. "There is something cathartic about watching things explode without consequences," he defended when she laughed at his confession. "I am not judging. I have watched every season of reality cooking competitions, multiple times. Now that is truly embarrassing. Mrs. Castellano did indeed appear midway through their meal, a tiny woman with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She spoke to Ethan in rapid Italian, of which Mira caught maybe 1 word in 10, then turned her attention to Mira. "You are too skinny. He is not feeding you enough already," she demanded. "This is our first dinner together," Mira said, charmed despite being called skinny. "First dinner? Then why does he look at you like that? Like you hung the moon, Mrs. Castellano," Ethan protested, but he was smiling. "I am just saying what I see. You bring a beautiful girl to my restaurant, you look at her with those puppy eyes. I know what this means." She patted Mira's shoulder. "You be careful with this one. He pretends to be all business, but really he has a soft heart. Do not break it." "I will do my best," Mira promised, trying not to laugh. After Mrs. Castellano swept away to terrorize other tables, Ethan shook his head. "I apologize for her. Don't. She is wonderful and she clearly cares about you. She knew my father. When I first took over the company and felt like I was drowning, I used to come here late at night and she would feed me and tell me stories about her own family's struggles building their business. She reminded me that success is not about never failing. It is about getting back up." His expression softened with affection. "She is family in all the ways that matter." Mira felt something in her chest expand. Every layer she uncovered about Ethan made her like him more, made him seem less like the untouchable billionaire and more like someone real and complicated and kind. Over dessert, tiramisu that melted on her tongue, Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. "I need to be honest about something. That sounds ominous, not ominous, just honest." He ran his thumb across her knuckles, the touch sending warmth up her arm. "I do not do this. I do not pursue women I barely know. Do not make impulsive decisions about donating money because someone has beautiful eyes and talks about art like it is oxygen. Last night, when I saw you trying to leave, I told myself I was stopping you for business reasons. But that was not the whole truth. What was the whole truth? I had been watching you all night. You looked so out of place but so beautiful, standing by that pillar like you were cataloging everyone for a study. I wanted to know what you were thinking. I wanted to make you smile. So I used the donation as an excuse to talk to you, and then I found out you were even more interesting than I imagined. And now, I am sitting here holding your hand and hoping you feel even a fraction of what I am feeling. Mira's heart was thundering in her chest. She should be cautious, should protect herself from getting involved with someone whose world was so different from hers. But looking at Ethan, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes, she found she could not make herself pull away. I feel it, she admitted quietly, and it terrifies me. Me too. He squeezed her hand, but maybe terrifying is not such a bad thing. They left the restaurant an hour later, stepping out into the cool night air. Ethan had parked on the street rather than using a driver, which surprised her until she remembered this was who he really was beneath the public persona. Just a man who wanted to drive himself to dinner with a woman he liked. "Can I take you somewhere?" he asked. "I promise it is not weird or presumptuous, just somewhere I think you would appreciate." "All right. But if this turns into a horror movie scenario, I am going to be very disappointed." Noted. They drove for 20 minutes, heading away from downtown and into an area of the city Mira did not know well. Ethan pulled up to a gate, entered a code, and they passed through into what looked like an industrial park. He stopped in front of a large warehouse with minimal exterior lighting. "This is definitely looking like a horror movie," Mira said, only half joking. "Trust me. Just for a few more minutes." He came around to open her door, then led her to a side entrance and unlocked it with another code. Inside, the space was vast and open, concrete floors and exposed beam ceiling. But it was what filled the space that made Mira gasp. Sculptures in various stages of completion, from rough clay models to polished bronze pieces. Workbenches covered in tools and sketches. A kiln in one corner, welding equipment in another. This was an artist's studio on a massive scale. "What is this place?" she breathed. "It is a project I started 2 years ago, a residency program for sculptors who need space and resources but cannot afford gallery representation yet. I provide the studio, the materials, the equipment. They create whatever they want without commercial pressure. Some of what they make eventually goes to galleries or collectors, but that is not the point. The point is giving them freedom to develop their vision." He walked deeper into the space, his voice echoing slightly. "There are 6 artists working here right now. They have keys and can come whenever they want. I almost never come by because I do not want them to feel watched or judged. But you came tonight. I wanted to share it with you, to show you that I understand what you meant last night about art being connection. This place, it connects me to something bigger than real estate deals and foundation galas. It reminds me why any of the money matters." Mira walked among the sculptures, examining each piece with reverence. They were stunning, diverse in style and subject matter but unified by the obvious passion that had gone into creating them. "Ethan, this is incredible. Do you support any other artists, painters, musicians, writers? Different programs for different needs. Most of it is quiet, not publicized. The Crawford Foundation does big, visible projects, but this is personal." He watched her study a bronze figure of a dancer mid-leap. "I want to do more. I want to create opportunities for artists the way someone created opportunities for my father. That is why your speech last night resonated so much. You are doing the same thing, just through a museum instead of private programs. We should collaborate, Mira said, the idea forming as she spoke. The museum could partner with your residency programs. We could showcase emerging artists, create educational programs around their work, give them exposure while staying true to your vision of freedom without commercial pressure. Ethan's face lit up. That is brilliant. We could create a whole new model for supporting working artists. They spent the next hour in the warehouse, walking among the sculptures and planning out ideas that became increasingly ambitious and exciting. By the time they left, they had sketched out the framework for a partnership that could genuinely change the landscape for emerging artists in the city. "I should get you home," Ethan said reluctantly as they got back in his car. "Even though I do not want this night to end." "Me either," Mira admitted. The drive back to her apartment was quiet but not uncomfortable. Just the two of them existing in the same space, processing everything that had happened. When Ethan pulled up in front of her building, he turned off the engine. "Can I see you again? Not for business planning, just for us?" he asked. "Yes, definitely yes." He got out and walked her to the door of her building, hands in his pockets like he was physically restraining himself from reaching for her. Mira found herself wanting him to reach, wanting to close the distance between them, but also appreciating his restraint. "Thank you for dinner. And for trusting me with your studio secret," she said. "Thank you for understanding why it matters." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She did not want to. The kiss was soft, questioning, his lips warm against hers. Mira felt it down to her toes, her hands coming up to rest against his chest where she could feel his heart racing as fast as hers. When they pulled apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I am in so much trouble," he murmured. "Why is that?" "Because I am already falling for you, and it has been less than 48 hours since I stopped you from leaving my gala. Then I guess it is good that I am falling too." He kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands coming up to cup her face with such tenderness it made her chest ache. When they finally separated, both of them were breathless. "Good night, Mira." "Good night, Ethan." She watched him drive away before floating up to her apartment, every nerve ending still tingling from his touch. This was dangerous and fast and probably not smart, but she had never felt anything quite like it before. Over the next 2 months, Mira and Ethan saw each other constantly. Some nights were formal, dinners at nice restaurants or gallery openings where Ethan introduced her to collectors and artists. Other nights were gloriously casual, takeout eaten on her couch while they watched those terrible action movies he loved, or long walks through the city talking about everything and nothing. Mira met his sister Jessica during a video call, the marine biologist grilling Mira about her intentions with barely concealed delight that Ethan had finally found someone. Ethan met Mira's parents when they visited from Ohio, her father charmed by Ethan's genuine interest in his work as a high school history teacher. Her mother won over by the way Ethan looked at her daughter like she was the most precious thing in the world. The museum partnership moved forward, with Mira working closely with Ethan's team to develop the Emerging Artist Showcase program. It was exciting professionally, but even more than that, it gave them a shared purpose beyond their personal relationship. They were building something together that would outlast both of them. There were challenges, of course. The media caught wind of their relationship, and suddenly, Mira found herself photographed and written about in ways that made her deeply uncomfortable. She was not used to public attention, did not want to be defined as someone's girlfriend rather than her own professional accomplishments. Ethan understood, using his resources to push back against the more invasive coverage and making sure she was never forced into the spotlight unless she chose it. They had their first real fight 6 weeks in, when a business emergency forced Ethan to cancel weekend plans they had been looking forward to for weeks. Mira felt the disappointment sharply and said things about him prioritizing work over her that were not entirely fair. He responded with frustration about the pressures of his responsibilities that came out harsher than he intended. They both retreated, hurt and angry. But Ethan showed up at her apartment 2 hours later, still in his business suit from whatever crisis had derailed their plans, and said, "I am sorry. You were right. I could have handled that differently, could have at least explained better instead of just canceling. I am not used to having someone who wants my time, who I want to make plans with. I am going to mess this up sometimes, but I need you to know that you matter more than any business deal." Mira had let him in, and they talked through it properly, learning how to navigate the complexities of balancing his demanding career with their relationship. It made them stronger, more sure of each other. 3 months after the gala, Ethan asked Mira to move in with him. She said yes without hesitation, and spent the next week packing up her small apartment and relocating to the penthouse downtown that Ethan called home. She worried initially about losing her independence, about being swallowed up by his wealth and lifestyle. But Ethan converted an entire room into an office for her, filled with her books and files and the paintings she loved. He made sure she had space that was completely hers, never pushing her to change or conform to his world. They fell into routines. Morning coffee on the balcony overlooking the city. Evenings cooking together in the kitchen that was too fancy for Mira's limited skills, but Ethan somehow made feel cozy. Weekends exploring antique shops and art galleries and neighborhoods they had never visited. It was domestic and sweet, and everything Mira had never let herself dream of having. The museum showcase opened 6 months after that initial gala. A stunning exhibition of work from the artists in Ethan's residency program, alongside pieces from the museum's collection that provided historical context. Mira had spent months curating it, and seeing it all come together was one of the proudest moments of her career. Ethan stood beside her at the opening, his hand warm in hers, and whispered, "You are extraordinary. You know that." "I had help from a billionaire with good taste and deep pockets," she whispered back. "That billionaire only provided resources. You provided the vision." A year to the day after the Crawford Foundation Gala where they had met, Ethan planned a surprise. He told Mira only to dress nicely and be ready by 6. She wore a simple black dress and the same silver heels from that first night, which had become more comfortable with practice and better inserts. A car picked them up and drove to the Crawford estate, which confused Mira since she knew there was not a gala scheduled. When they arrived, the house was dark except for lights coming from the ballroom. "What is this?" she asked as Ethan led her inside. The ballroom had been transformed. Instead of hundreds of guests, there was just a single table set for 2 in the center of the room, candles casting warm light and flowers arranged in lush displays. A string quartet played softly from the corner. It was intimate and romantic and completely overwhelming. "I wanted to recreate our beginning," Ethan said, pulling out her chair. "Except this time, I do not have to worry about you trying to escape early. This time I am definitely staying," she assured him, sitting down with tears already pricking her eyes. Dinner was every dish they had shared over the past year. The lasagna from Mrs. Castellano's restaurant, sushi from the place they had discovered on their 3rd date, chocolate cake from the bakery near her old apartment that she was obsessed with. Each course came with a story, Ethan recounting memories from their time together that made Mira laugh and cry in equal measure. "You remember all of this?" She asked after he told her about the first time she had made him watch one of her cooking competition shows, and he had gotten genuinely invested in who would win. "I remember everything about you. The way you chew your bottom lip when you are thinking. How you always order decaf coffee after 6, but pretend it is regular. The fact that you cry at every movie, even the action ones with explosions. I remember it all because I never want to forget a single moment of loving you." After dessert, Ethan stood and offered his hand. The quartet began playing a waltz, and he led her to the center of the empty ballroom floor. "I am not a great dancer," Mira warned as they began to move. "Neither am I, but we can be not great together." He held her close, one hand at her waist and the other clasped with hers, and they swayed to the music. "This is the most romantic thing anyone has ever done for me," Mira said, her head resting against his shoulder. "Good. Because I plan to spend the rest of my life being the most romantic person in your life." He pulled back enough to look at her face. "Mira, this year with you has been the happiest of my life. You make everything better, brighter, more meaningful. You see me, the real me underneath all the public stuff and the money and the expectations. You challenge me and support me and make me want to be better. I cannot imagine my life without you in it anymore." He released her hand and reached into his pocket, then lowered himself to one knee right there in the middle of the ballroom. Mira's hands flew to her mouth as he opened a small velvet box to reveal a ring that took her breath away. The center stone was an emerald, deep green and glowing in the candlelight, surrounded by diamonds in an Art Deco setting that was clearly vintage. "This ring belonged to my grandmother," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. "She and my grandfather were married for 57 years, and she told me before she died that I should give this to someone who understood that love is built, not just found. Someone who would partner with me to create something lasting. That is you, Mira. You are my partner in everything that matters. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Mira breathed, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, then stood and swept her into a kiss that felt like a promise. The quartet swelled into something triumphant, and Mira laughed against his lips, deliriously happy. "I love you so much," she said when they finally broke apart. "I love you too, more than I knew I could love anyone." He kissed her again, softer this time. "Thank you for staying that night. For giving me a chance. Thank you for stopping me from leaving, for seeing something in me worth stopping for." They danced for another hour, talking about the future they would build together. A wedding, eventually, but they were not in a rush. Maybe kids someday when the time felt right. Definitely more collaborations between their work, more ways to support artists and education, and all the things they both believed in. A life full of art and purpose and love. When Mira finally kicked off those silver heels, and they sat at the table eating leftover cake with their fingers like teenagers, she looked at Ethan and felt such overwhelming gratitude for the chain of events that had brought them together. "What are you thinking?" he asked, licking chocolate from his thumb. "That a year ago, I was standing by a marble pillar counting down minutes until I could escape your gala, and now I never want to leave. You are stuck with me now. I stopped you from leaving once. I will do it every time if I have to." "I do not think you will have to. I am exactly where I want to be." 2 years later, Mira and Ethan stood in the garden of the Crawford estate, surrounded by family and friends, and promised to love each other for the rest of their lives. Jessica was the maid of honor, crying through the entire ceremony despite her tough marine biologist exterior. Mrs. Castellano catered the reception, naturally, and gave a toast in Italian that made everyone laugh, even though most people did not understand the words. The museum was thriving, with the emerging artist program expanding to include international residencies. Ethan had stepped back slightly from day-to-day operations of his company to focus more on the foundation and the creative projects that fulfilled him. They had found balance together, building a life that honored both their ambitions and their love. On their wedding night, after the reception had wound down and the guests had departed, Ethan and Mira found themselves back in that ballroom where he had proposed. The decorations from the wedding still adorned the space, flowers and lights and beauty everywhere. "We should make this a tradition," Ethan said, pulling her close for a dance. "Every year we come back here and remember." "Remember what?" "That I almost let you walk out that door. That you were going to leave and I might never have known what I was missing." He rested his forehead against hers. "That the best decision I ever made was stopping you and convincing you to stay." "Best decision we both made," Mira corrected. "I chose to stay. I chose you. And I would make that choice every single day for the rest of my life." 3 years after their wedding, Mira discovered she was pregnant. They had not been trying actively, but they had not been preventing either, letting life unfold naturally. Ethan cried when she told him, overwhelmed with joy and terror in equal measure. Their daughter was born on a sunny morning in May, with dark hair like Mira and blue eyes like Ethan. They named her Eleanor Rose Crawford, and she was perfect in every impossible way. Ethan proved to be a devoted father, completely undone by this tiny human who had him wrapped around her finger from the first moment. When Eleanor was 6 months old, Mira returned to work part-time, refusing to lose the career she had built even as she treasured motherhood. Ethan adjusted his schedule to share parenting duties equally, and they figured out the complex dance of balancing professional aspirations with family life. It was not always easy, but they were a team, and they made it work. 5 years after the gala, Mira stood in the museum she loved, watching Eleanor toddle through the European wing with wonder on her tiny face. She stopped in front of a painting, a landscape with dramatic clouds and gorgeous light, and reached out her hand like she wanted to touch it. "No touching, sweet girl," Mira said gently, scooping her daughter up. "But we can look as long as you want." Ethan appeared beside them, having been on a phone call in the lobby. He wrapped his arm around Mira's waist and they stood together, the three of them, looking at art that had survived centuries and would survive centuries more. "What do you think, Ellie?" Ethan asked his daughter. "Do you like it?" "Pretty," Eleanor pronounced, then squirmed to be put down so she could investigate the sculpture in the corner. "She has good taste," Mira said, watching her daughter with boundless love. "She gets that from her mother." Ethan kissed Mira's temple, among many other excellent qualities. "You are biased, completely, and I have no intention of ever being anything else." They wandered through the museum together, the family they had built from a chance encounter and a decision to stay when leaving would have been easier. Mira thought about that night 5 years ago, standing by the pillar in her borrowed dress, wanting nothing more than to escape. She thought about Ethan seeing her there and choosing to approach, to engage, to stop her from walking away. How different her life would have been if he had not stopped her, if she had not stayed, if they had not both been brave enough to take a chance on something that felt too fast and too big and too important to ignore. But he had stopped her. She had stayed. And he had spent every day since making sure she was glad she did. Making sure they were both glad, building a love that was deep and true and lasting. As Eleanor giggled at a sculpture of a bird taking flight, and Ethan reached for Mira's hand with the easy intimacy of someone who knew every part of her, Mira felt nothing but gratitude for art that brought people together. For galas, she had wanted to escape but stayed for anyway. For billionaires who saw past the surface to the person underneath. For love that was built day by day, choice by choice, until it became the foundation of everything. She was glad, so impossibly glad she had stayed.